Jump in. So, Brenda, how are you? Let's start there. This is 2020. How are you doing? And yeah, and maybe like, what are three words that you're feeling right now? Three feelings you have right now in this moment.
So first of all, thank you so much for doing this series. I think it is so important that we have these conversations. I actually think conversations like these are the silver lining for the crazy times that we're living in, right? And so being responsive to those times and giving us opportunities to talk about things that we really should have been talking about for a long time is such a plus. And I really admire you, Mashiwa, for all the work that you do and for making this happen. So how am I? So, I'm excited to be alive. Even it's more clearly a blessing than it's ever been, right? Because so many people are dealing with being sick or, having lost loved ones. So I'm just grateful to be able to sit here and to participate in today's times that are really, really very challenging. I'm going to be open and honest and say that I'm challenged, and I think we are all challenged. And I think to be able to be transparent like that and say, there's no playbook for what we're going through right now. And the way we'll get through it is to have these conversations, to dig into things that we really were too busy. We thought we were too busy to do before in terms of defining productivity, right? I think there were a lot of things that those of us knew were the right things to do, and we were talking about them. And then when they got talked over, we were like, okay, we'll get to that. We'll come back around to that. Whereas now we're reprioritizing. So I'm reprioritizing. I'm being real with myself. I'm being honest with myself. I think to a certain extent, I'm giving myself more passes than I ever have before. I have to say I'm a perfectionist. Perfectionists do not give themselves passes at all. I've had to say, if we're going to survive this in leading my family and leading an organization and being a leader at all, thinking about ways to help people get through these times productively, I've had to turn that mirror on myself. Take breaks, forgive yourself. So it's actually an opportunity for growth for all of us. And I've been taking that opportunity as well.
Yeah.
I think you asked me 3 words, right? Did you say 3 words?
I said, yes.
Sorry. I think
I
overloaded that a bit.
No, it's good. It's good. It's all good. And I should point out too, that you also have been having some really great, deep conversations weekly. And I want to point everybody to those conversations too. Those are real conversations. And, this episode right now, we're talking about women championing women, and women championing women right now looks a little different maybe in a lot of people's minds than it used to. And I think that's important. And the conversations that you're having around being anti-racist and really going deep, I think is super important. So thank you thanks for the work that you do too. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about how you got here? What was your journey? You've been working on this. You've been working to create change for a long time. What is your journey? What was your journey to get here in this moment, doing the work that you do?
I could go so many places with that. So I'll do the simple way, and then I'll talk about, what I feel like could be helpful to people in terms of their own journeys, right? Because we always question where we are, and are we fulfilling the goals we have for ourselves? And many times when things take a turn that are different than what we expected, we wonder if we're off in some way. And I could look at my background in the same way. I wanted to be a doctor probably from the time I was 4. And so I would do things like watch surgeries and all kinds of things that most people just wouldn't do as a kid. And so, obviously I was a STEM kid, studied science, and then went to college as pre-med. And then got there and realized that really the reason I wanted to go into medicine is because I really wanted to impact the human condition. I wanted to make life better for people. I wanted to solve problems, and health is an easy, avenue to say, okay, if I can make it so people are not ill, right? But then when I looked at how medicine was practiced in the US, I was very dissatisfied and thought I couldn't be part of it. And so that's, weird turn number one, right? All my life, I thought I wanted to do this thing. And then all of a sudden I'm getting there and I'm going, oh, that's not what I want to do. So did I waste my time? Did I not think about things in the correct way? So, but while studying pre-med, I had to take a couple of programming classes because my major was biomedical engineering. And all engineers were required to take programming classes. I had never had a programming class before. I had never considered anything around computer science. And so all of a sudden, because of my pursuing my passion and then losing my desire for it, even in pursuing it, I found something that's impacted my entire career, right? So to people who feel like, wow, I thought I wanted to do something and now I'm disappointed that I'm changing directions, stay tuned, because all of that really feeds into how you become the person that is most impactful, which is, I think, what we all want to be, right? We want to be able to leave, as my parents raised me, leave the place that you go to better than you found it, right? We all want that impact. And so all of those things that you end up doing, they feed into your ability to do what we're talking about today. Have empathy for the folks that you're going to end up serving. If you don't understand them, if you're on the straight and narrow and you don't deviate at all, how in the world are you ever going to understand anybody else? Because most people deviate. I can know a few people. There's one in my family who wanted to be all her life wanted to be a lawyer. She's a lawyer, the whole thing, poli-sci, the whole, went the distance, right? But most of us deviate in some way. So I ended up starting out as a software engineer. I worked in corporate for about 40% of my career, did it, was good at it, was okay with it. But the reason why I wanted to do medicine didn't really translate many times into what I was doing in corporate. And it was really the issues that we address at AnitaB.org around culture for women being successful and more women getting into tech that led me to my next step. And, as my friend Megan Smith coined, the 1,000 paper cuts, I took my 1,000 paper cuts and a pregnant belly and said, I can't do this. Let me find something else to do, because at that time people didn't want you to talk about being a mommy, any of that, right? And so that's what led me into an opportunity I found around education. And it was there that I found my passion, because I started out in continuing ed. My students were from 18 to 80. And these were people who many times had been discouraged, as I was, for being a woman or being a Black person, from getting into tech. And now they were like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm giving up my TV time. I'm coming after work and I'm going to learn. And all of a sudden I thought, wow, I can help. I can empathize. I can be that bridge, right? And that led me to create lots of programs at the post-secondary level, and then to go into K-12 where, wow, that's where I came full circle, a largely Black and brown district where people were not taught computer science, just like I was not as a kid, because they were Black and brown, and why do those people need that anyway? So I could totally empathize with having had that gap. And there is where I launched Computer Science for All. So all of that deviation, right, was exactly what I needed to be impactful, which leads me to where I am today, which is to accelerate diversity at the table where tech is created, adding more women, adding more just non-majority folks to the table. So it's been a journey. It's been a crazy journey, but I don't see how it could have been different for me to be able to do what I'm doing. I'm hoping that encouraged somebody.
Yeah, no, it encouraged me too, because I'm not alone in all those deviations too. Like I started thinking that I was going to be a surgeon because I wanted to I wanted to save lives, impact lives. And then I started to realize, well, there's a lot of ways that I can save lives and impact lives, and started out in cultural anthropology, and then art, and then film, and then marketing and culture. And now here I am too. So I think those deviations can enrich the work so much. And
so much. And see, now I even know why you're as wonderful as you are. I mean, all of that, right? It makes so much sense.
Likewise. So, well, I was at Grace Hopper last year, and you made a pretty bold goal. You set out to do something pretty big in the industry. You want to talk about it a little bit? What was that? What is that goal that you set out to accomplish?
So for those of you who may not know our history, our founder, our namesake, our co-founder, who was prior CEO, set an ambitious goal way back in 1995 that we should have gender parity in tech by 2020. And so that phrase was 50-50 by 2020. And so many times when you start to talk, and Melinda, you know this, when people start to talk about change or in terms of diversity, they go, oh, it's going to take a long time. Oh, it's just going to take a long time. And they use that word over and over in that phrase. And we thought, so we weren't going to make 2020 by the time I came on board. It was 2018. We saw that wasn't going to work. And so we thought, okay, but what is the goal, right? And so then people were talking about, oh, what about 2090? 2050. And I thought, one of my favorite sayings is, if you give it a long time, it's going to take a long time. And so we thought, no, people set goals and then they don't get motivated till halfway through anyway. And so if it's an aggressive goal, we can be motivated from day one. So we changed the 50-50 by 2020 to 50-50 by 2025. And we thought, could we make a big difference in 5 years? And we said, yes, we could. We absolutely could if we set our mind to it and we didn't take our foot off the gas. Now, what's underlying that goal, not based so much on the year and, the percentage, I think another way we look at it is my favorite 5 words: intersectional gender and pay parity. Because when you think about what we're trying to do, we're trying to make sure that gender parity is there, but that sometimes had problems because that was coded. Yep. And we weren't talking about economic injustices that we're hearing about now across age, race, in all different types of demographics, which is pay. And so when you think about intersectional, then that makes sure that we talk about the different needs and concerns and cultural aspirations of people at different intersections, whether that means they're differently abled, whether that means that they're of a different age and also of a different race than the folks that are in the majority there. All of that needs addressing. And so that's really, underlying the goal is intersectional gender and pay parity. People need to be paid the same for the same job. We need diversity at all different levels. And so that's what we set out to do. So one thing I want to say about that is I think that many times that's a challenge because it's harder, right? It's easier to keep things simple, but even looking at the picture here, we're all different and it's in different ways. And that's the richness of it. And so why wouldn't we measure it? And so that's why it was very important not just to say gender parity, but intersectional gender and pay parity.
Yeah. I mean, equal pay day for white and Asian women comes a whole lot sooner in the year than it does for Black, Indigenous, and Latinx women. And that's just one aspect too, right? That's, we're also looking at leadership, at board seats, at promotion equity, and then, the other piece of it is supporting women who are that are experiencing daily microaggressions and macroaggressions and discrimination and racism, whether inside of the work or outside of the workplace, that all kind of comes together and in our experience, and so key. So maybe that's a jumping off point to talk specifically about how can women who are not Black be better allies for Black women right now. I mean, this is a moment in time where there's heightened awareness. I will not, it's not like it's different than it was a month, 2 months ago, but in terms of the racism in our society and in our systems, but it is different in the spotlight and the attention right now. So
Yeah.
anyway, how can we be better allies for Black women right now?
So first of all, you make a good point. Things are no different now than they were 2 months ago for many of us.
Mm-hmm.
They're different now than they were potentially 2 months ago for some of us. And so I think there's a lot here, right? So growing up as a Black person, I'm well educated on the majority society. Our school books, our acculturation when we go to college, we're well educated on being the other. What has to happen first and foremost is that education needs to happen for the folks that are non-Black. Self-awareness, I think if you were to look at, if I could make a picture of an axis that showed the amount of awareness, self-awareness that's required by group, my opinion, and the opinion of many who've researched this, is it increases by the number of your intersections that are in the margins, right? And so conversely, those who are not in the margins do not need to be self-aware, because the world has been made so that they don't have to think about who they are and how who they are impacts other people. And so the first thing towards allyship, if that's what we're going to call it, is understanding that. It's sort of like you go to the mall, huge mall. I hate shopping. But anyway, you go to the mall and there's the map, right? And the first thing you want to know is, if I want to go over there, where am I in respect to over there? And so really what's important right now is for people to introspect and understand where they are in this conversation. And I think that requires them to be, that requires a level of humility. If you're totally ignorant of other cultures, that's on you. That's not on them. It's not a ding on you. It's just where you are. Are you in first grade? Or are you in fourth grade? Or are you in sixth grade? Don't assume, introspect, figure it out. Talk to people who can help you understand where you are in terms of doing that research. Number two, figure out what you need to learn to get from first grade to second grade, or from second grade to third grade. And to something that, we were talking about before we came on about, it's going to take time. It took us 400 years to get to where we are right now. People should not expect that in 2 days, they're going to read an article, they're going to talk to a Black friend, and they're all going to be cool. And aren't we over this? It's not something to be over. So one of the recommendations that I've made to people that will get people prepared to be an ally is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because part of the problem that exists now with racism and all the other isms is that has been this concept of the majority group feeling comfortable. And so the rest of us have had to just fit ourselves around the comfort, expectations, and understanding of the majority group. So now if that's going to change, then those who've been comfortable have got to be ready to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the challenge. So, that's sort of like I'm setting the foundation, right?
Yeah.
Because people are like looking for 1, 2, 3. I just need to do this, this, this. It's not that simple. And so what people are going to have to do is catch up to stuff that some of us have been doing our whole lives, which is figuring out how we fit in this environment and figuring out the 15 different assumptions that might be made about us and how we might want to address those, or how we might want to help people get along with those. All of that, that's a lot of work. And so people who want to be allies have to be prepared to do work. So, that's a place to start.
Yeah.
Right? Because we get along better when we understand each other. And that's part of empathy, is to get to a level of understanding, or seek a level of understanding. I don't know that we'll ever get there, but we need to be going there.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the you know, you're obviously an ally for other women in the work that you do. I mean, ally, advocate, activist. I think that's all in the range of allyship in my mind. What are some of the things that you think about when you are doing that work, when you're advocating for women? What are some practical things that that come up for you in your mind as you're doing this work?
So a lot of things. And I think that's, again, part of what conversations like this are helpful and why we're doing our own webinar series and having conversations. When you want to advocate for someone, you have to understand them. And you don't understand them necessarily by doing, 10 questions. I'm coming to understand you today. Can you help me understand you? There has to be a serious desire to learn. And most of us learn really well when we listen.
Mm-hmm.
So being part of conversations that you wouldn't normally be a part of, sitting down with people that you wouldn't normally sit down with. I mean, so part of the issue that we're experiencing is an issue of segregation. We've had segregated conversations. We have judged people on things that, especially in the workplace, that they're not skills. Having gone to Stanford is not a skill. It's your alma mater. Okay. And so being willing to sit down and talk to people and not judge them based upon their credential that matches yours. So it's like actively seeking out to get into conversations, read articles. If you're a recruiter, recruit in places you wouldn't normally recruit. Open up your aperture. We like to talk about thinking outside the box. I like to talk in COVID and social unrest times of there is no box. Let's start over. Mm-hmm. Let's start over. Look at that person as though that person could be you and say, what can I learn about you? Let's have a conversation human to human. And then what I learned from it in my own advocacy, let's say, for instance, I learned about someone who is from a different socioeconomic environment than I'm accustomed to. As an advocate, I'm thinking of how can I help, either personally or how can I connect that person to someone who can help them. So it's like, first of all, I'm listening, and I'm listening not in judgment. I'm listening to be supportive. And we started a program we call Tech Journey Fund based on just that. We listened outside the box to a request from an academic individual that we had met with, who said, I got this great student. She's a 3.9 in average. She can't come back second semester because she can't finish paying last semester's tuition. Mm-hmm. Well, if those of us who've been in academics, we know that there are scholarships and they have regular schedules. They're like in October or they're like in April. And I was getting this conversation in December. And I was like, okay, when does she need the money? January 9th. And this was December 26th. And I was like, right. So what I didn't do is go, oh, well, she can apply in April. Mm-hmm. It was like, what did she need?
Right.
She needed to go back to school. And we needed her to go back to school because she's the very person that people claim they would hire if they could find them. Right. So then that pushes her needed in priority as an advocate forward. And I'm happy to say we figured out how to get her back to school in 9 days.
Wow.
And then out of that, we created a fund called Tech Journey Fund that was specifically for instances like that. Food scarcity, can't finish paying my tuition, my car broke down, things that we don't normally think about that impact millions of people. So we were able to advocate not just for her, but for others. We learned, okay, this is an issue. How can we now step in and do something? So it's like, if you want to help, a lot of people say, I want to help. If you want to help, you're going to listen, and then you're going to figure out what you can do or who you can connect that person to that can help.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if the whole world, if everyone were to rethink things in that framework and ask, how can I help every time they meet someone? Imagine how different everything would be. It's Yeah.
If everyone did it, or even let's start with 10%. If 10%,
yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
The world would be a different place.
The world would be a different place. And I think that it goes to the workplace as well. So many people in the workplace kind of rely on HR and rely on diversity and inclusion advocates to create change. And if you instead, all of us were to say, well, how can I help? What can I do differently in my own role? What can I do to create change? Because we all have power in some way or another.
We do. We certainly do.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about women working with women. And, one of the things that I have found in the work that I've done around diversity and inclusion is sometimes the most resistance for the work that I'm doing inside a company, inside of an organization, comes from a woman. And I understand that it's or another underrepresented person. It's not always women, but it's another underrepresented person. And that's part of that is that when you are the only in the room all of the time, there's a lot of covering and code switching that can happen in the workplace, and that kind of like being reticent to talk about and put anything around diversity on the table, because that's calling yourself out and making it about that rather than your work. And I totally get that. And I also think that we need to get past our own trauma and our own that blocker in ourselves, so that we can be there and lift each other up in a different way. That and so my question, I guess, is how do we get out of this competition, women competing with one another, and really work to be there for one another, support one another? There's a Unilever study that said that showed that 82% of men have male mentors, but 69% of women have women mentors, and so there's a disparity there. We all could do better. And I know this is something that you've thought about a lot in the work that you do. How do we get out of that? How do we do better for each other?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think again, it's knowledge, right? It's the acknowledgement that we do that to each other first and foremost, and where it comes from, right? So I mean, when we were raised, I'll speak for myself and my age demographic, we were all raised with books about the princess or the belle at the ball. Mm-hmm. Understanding that our culture has taught us to compete to be the prettiest girl, the one who gets the most popular guy, all of that stuff. It's in the water we all swim in. And if we don't consciously acknowledge that, we'll bring that to work. Mm-hmm. And then at work, people will say things like, either consciously or unconsciously say things that lead you to know that there's some competition. Well, there was this other woman who did, not this other person, this other woman. And so you start to go, and I know she's on the track. And so you're absorbing that, and you don't even realize that you're absorbing that strife that you got from reading your princess book, and you can fall right in line with that. And then when you run into women, because I had the same history when I was a technologist. First, I was excited to see women in positions of power there, and then some of my reactions with them made me not so excited. And so then you start to either not be as supportive of people because you're protecting of yourself. So I love what you said. It's born out of a lot of the trauma that we've experienced as we deal with these things. And unfortunately, many times trauma causes us to turn the bad reactions on those that are closest to us, those that we relate to the most, which in this situation is another woman. So that's one thing. Number two, when you start talking about racial support, I think, I would say to non-Black women to understand that history as well. when one of our webinar series, one of our panelists reminded us that even in the women's suffrage movement, that was separate. The white women wanted, and they did get the right to vote before Black women, and many of them were fighting for that differentiation as well. And so what I have experienced many times is that there is an irritation when you want to talk about the intersection. We want to talk about all women. It's sort of like all lives matter.
Yeah.
Right? We want to talk about all women, and we don't want to talk about the unique issues that face Black women, if that's what we're talking about today. And so we get that irritation, like, well, what about me? Again, I'm the princess. What about me? You're leaving me out, versus having the attitude that none of us are free if we're all not free.
Right.
So it's a different perspective that we have to stop dead in our tracks and go, what's in my bag that's causing me to not be an advocate? And why am I irritated when she brings up the fact that she's Black? Why does that irritate me? There's something in history that's caused you to be irritated. There's something about your own experiences that have caused you to be irritated, and only you can address that. And that's that introspection, that self-awareness that may not have been historically as needed amongst women as, sorry, somebody's calling me, as it was, and I'm trying to stop that. Please forgive me.
Take your time.
Yeah, so that's the hard part, and I don't know how to stop this. Sorry about that. I thought I had turned everything off. That's this Zoom life that we're leaving in. Hopefully they'll stop calling me. Okay. Yeah, sorry, y'all. So it's the introspection. And I think the other thing I would say is so important is leave offense at the door.
Yeah.
Try not to be offended when somebody explains to you how they feel, because they feel like they feel. It's not about them making you comfortable that they have that feeling. I think the whole nation could take that as a great
no kidding
lesson, right? It's not about being offended, it's about solving this problem. And it's such a wonderful goal to get to the place where we can all get along with each other, respect each other, create an environment where we can work together, especially in tech. When you think about it, we solve problems for the entire world. When we can solve this problem at the table where tech is created, more problems will be solved for everybody, and less problems will be created by the tech we develop.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a couple more questions and then move to Q&A. So if anybody has questions, please put it in the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. So what are some ways that companies can start to create change internally and encourage women to support women and also specifically support Black women in their companies right now?
So there's lots of ways. So I think, one thing is we all have to start to watch our language, and I'm doing the same thing. There's a whole conversation, and I heard you say it earlier, and I said it too, so I'm not directing it at anyone, because we use these terms because we are trying to work in this area. When you say underrepresented, it puts the onus on that person. It's like they're deficient. And even if you look in the dictionary and you look at the synonyms for that, none of them are good. And if we use terms like whitelisted and blacklisted and slave and master, and in tech there's the female versus the male join, and it's all of that language that we've gotten so comfortable with that we don't understand many times translates over into the small talk where really the egregiousness happens. And that can be translated in many ways. I think we as women have to make sure that we don't tolerate places where people are talking about our appearance. If we look at the last election, everybody was talking about Hillary's hair and, you know, what kind of pants
Right.
she was. Who cares, right?
Right.
And so when we say, what does that have to do with, if we can somehow educate as we are talking to people, where, you know, somebody says, I really liked her hair today. And you say, what does that have to do with the comment? But I think what she said was really important. The point that she made was really what we should be talking about. And so then we slowly start to educate people to get away from the objectifying comments and descriptors that people make. So I think in the environment, and what we try to do, and what I try to do as a leader, is I set that example. We have been working on our conversation and words that we use for a long time, and we call it out. And many times it's innocent. You don't know. You've just heard it growing up, or you've heard it going to school, and you didn't realize. So it's like, okay, now we realize, let's move away from saying those things. I think the other thing is we need to get away from tokenism. You know, the goal of intersectional gender and pay parity means equal. When we say 50-50, that means equal. If women are 50% of the society, they should be 50% of tech, or they should be closer, right? We don't have to be surgical, but we know that white men are 30% of society, but they represent 60, 80, 90% of tech in many cases.
Right.
But that's not discussed. So it's like, what is it we can do to make sure we get away from tokenism, whether it's women and whether it's Black people? Another thing is get away from the scarcity mentality. There aren't many. I was actually on a call with someone recently who said, you know, I really can't say that we would, you know, hire a bunch of Black people, because if I did, that means I would be stealing them from other companies. And I'm like, so that means you don't think that there are any. Now, that has to be challenged. Someone would say, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that there aren't any already? We can't hire at mid-career. There aren't any mid-career women that could meet that might be Black? Because that person may not have even understood what she said, but it's in there, right? Because we've all been swimming in the same pool. So as leaders, we have to watch our words. We have to set examples and make demands that show a difference. So I want to make sure that when I have a slate of candidates, that I have a big slate of candidates from my recruiter, and that the recruiter has 30% non-majority folks. Not one. Rooney was a good start. That was 10 years ago. Okay, let's move forward.
Right.
You know what?
Another one.
Let's keep going, right? We know a tipping point happens if we want to get to parity at 30%. So 30% at least should be non-majority. Let's use that term too, because it speaks to it. And so setting that example for folks, and they are able to see and not just hear your words. They see you doing those things that are meaningful and taking those steps going forward. Now, I have to warn, I'm going to warn everybody who tries this, whether you're Black or white or whatever you are, as a leader, be ready for the pushback. Be ready for people who are not accustomed to the picture that you're about to paint to feel uncomfortable. Remember, that was that uncomfortable thing again? They may not even understand why. And then they start to use things like reverse racism and tokenism or quota, et cetera. And it's not that. Be willing to stand strong and say, that's not what we're doing. We're addressing our diversity problem. We are non-diverse. We're not going to leave any more money on the table, because it shows the companies that are diverse in their boards and in their leadership, they tend to, their bottom lines are impacted up to 35% better. Let's bring it to the stuff that everybody can understand. We're moving forward. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah. Looking at the Q&A, Kimberly has a question that I have too, I've been grappling with this too. So if we don't say underrepresented, what do we say? And you said non-majority, but that's still there's still a negative there. Is there anything else?
Undertapped.
Okay.
or untapped.
Okay.
You tap something of value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Awesome. Um, so looking at some of the other questions, Andrew has a question: as a white gay male, how do I become a better ally for women? And he wants to become more engaged, involved in creating change for women in the workplace. Anything specifically that comes up for you? And I'm going to go off camera for a second and plug in my computer. The power code came out. So I'm going to leave you to answer that question for 1 second. And you're going to see a blank slate here for a moment.
Yeah, that virtual life. Yeah. So I think one of the easiest ways is when you're on projects, look around and see who's on this project. And if it's all a bunch of men, why? Ask why. If you have experience working with women that you could recommend for that project, recommend them. Challenge the men on the project as well to say, why we would do really a service to this organization and this project if we were more diverse. Who do you know in the organization who could come in and help us with this? And make sure that when you look around, that no longer the norm is looking around at a bunch of people that look like you, but that there are people who don't look like you. And that goes across all intersections. That's differently able people, that's different ages, etc. Instead of that comfort of, okay, we're all from the same school, we all speak the same language, we all have the same fraternity, we all drink the same beer. None of those are skills. I reiterate, think about making sure that you have the skills, the diversity of skill sets at the table that come from the differing experiences. So that's one way. The another way is to make sure that now once those women are in the room, that they aren't talked over. Many times there's this conversation that happens where women make a suggestion or they speak up and there is this pause and there's no comment. I mean, even if the comment is, that's a great thought, thank you for contributing that something, versus letting it pass, letting a man inevitably say basically the same thing, and all of a sudden, oh, Jim, that's a great idea. So we want to make sure that we are speaking up and supporting people who make good suggestions. I'm not saying that everybody's suggestion is good and everybody needs to get a pat on the back, but watch, be more, I think advocates and allies, it's again being aware of what has been happening all along that you just didn't notice because it probably didn't impact you. So, the first step is sit in a meeting and watch now what's happening that you thought was normal through a different lens. Say, I'm going to be an advocate to this woman, to this Black woman. If I am, I have to watch the experience that she's having in this meeting. And then when you notice it, if depending upon the relationship you have, if there was something that you thought was kind of off and you have an opportunity to talk with that person outside the meeting, say, how did you feel about that? And, I really want to make sure that I can be supportive. What could I have done better? And be willing to take that feedback and not necessarily explain it away or explain why. I've had people who say they want to be advocates of me, ask me a question, and then immediately explain to me why that's not what happened. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't agree, it's kind of negates the advocacy part to try to tell that person why what they experienced was not what they experienced. So resist that temptation. And I think over time, what you'll find is looking in through a different lens that probably doesn't impact you will help you understand how to be an advocate. Let me give you an example. We had a gentleman on our team. We're a largely female organization. And we had a gentleman who was on our team. And at the time, he was the only one out of like 6 of us. And we would, talk about various things. But women, having been in that role, having been the only, would on a regular occasion turn and say, hey, I'm going to make up a name, Mitch, what's your opinion on that? Do we leave anything out that, might impact men or male people? And he said to me in one of our one-on-ones, he said, I've never experienced that before. I've never done that. And I've been in rooms where I was all male and there was one woman, and never occurred to me to do that. And I've learned so much by that example. And so, you know, being able to say, what would I want in that situation, and listening and then following up with that person and seeing what they think. First of all, you're going to build a much better relationship. Mm-hmm. And then that person will know that they can rely on you, and they might be more open even to ask you for ways that you could be supportive.
So Shireen asks, what are some of the ways that Anita B is changing right now? How are you shifting right now? What are you thinking about differently in 2020? So
I'd like to say that, and I think this is mostly true, we were already doing this. I mean, I feel like, you know, this is who we are. We are about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we had already started turning the mirror on ourselves and asking how we could be better advocates for all women. In fact, we talk about, okay, one of the phrases that I know is irritating, and we've gotten feedback from many people that are irritating to some of us, is when people say women and minorities.
Yeah.
So which one am I today? Mm-hmm. Do I get to be a woman, or do I get to be a minority, or am I somewhere in the middle? Mm-hmm. Right. So we had already been trying to figure out ways to say things that don't leave people out. Right. And I get what people are meaning. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that people are trying to do anything. It's just our language is lacking. Our lexicon for being inclusive has just been lacking, because that's not the culture we've had in this country. And so we've had to work actively at figuring out ways of saying things that don't leave people out. Mm-hmm. And so we've been working on our words and tying them to our values. And so one of our values is curiosity. And so if there are issues that we don't understand that meet inclusion or meet cultural inclusion, then our value says we're going to seek it out. We're going to seek to learn more. We're either going to have a lunch and learn, or we're going to study it in some way. We're going to speak about it so that we can increase the, you know, there's a term, cultural competence. Is that the word? Cultural excellence. Yeah. So I just want culturally growing towards cultural competence. I am the first to say, because we're a global organization, I don't understand all other cultures. I'm grappling with my own here in the United States. Mm-hmm. So our perspective has been, we are learners. We are seeking to contribute to a conversation by learning the needs of others. Now, it depends on who the others are, right? Understanding the needs of Native American women being different from the needs of Black women. The needs of Native American women rural are different from the needs of Native American women urban. So really just thinking about, and you know, again, like I said earlier, many times people think, oh, it's just so much work. Yeah, it is. And if this is not what you want to do, then this is the wrong work for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, was that not nice? I mean,
no,
really, I would rather have a doctor who really understands my whole person versus somebody who says, I don't really care about all of that. I'm just here to treat your toe. Well, my toe is attached to my body. Mm-hmm. And if you don't understand the different challenges that I might have as a Black woman coming into that room with you or into the hospital with you, then you can't help me and you might even harm me. And so we're trying to work on increasing our cultural competence. We're admitting where we haven't done it right. And we're always listening. You know, people will reach out to me and say some kind of crazy stuff sometimes on Twitter. And I always go, thank you. I'm going to take that back and see, you know, what I can do first for me. And then what we can do as an organization to make sure that wherever that was coming from, that we're not contributing to it. And that then we can also shift to making it better.
I think this is the last question. Ashton has this question, and I heard you say something early on around you said allyship, if you want to call it that. Is there something behind what you said there? What do you think of allyship, and what is allyship to you? What is that, is there something else that you really think about beyond or differently?
No, what I worry about when we grab terms is that they begin to not mean anything after a while. And then it becomes some candy coated, I'm being your ally today because I said, you look nice today. It's really, to me, all of it is about the golden rule. Would you want to be treated in this way? Can you treat me in the way that you would want to be treated? Can you assume that you don't know everything about me and learn from me? If that's allyship, then that's what I want. If there's a better term for it, we're always seeking that. But I think the last thing I want to leave with people is allies it's not a one-way reaction. Right? If I seek someone out and I'm friendly to them to be a friend, I get a friend in return. If you're an ally to someone, they're going to be an ally for you, because we're all in this together. It's not some people are winning and some people are losing. It's we all win. If the environment is less toxic, it's better for everybody. You have less turnover, you have happier team members, you have better results, you have a better bottom line. So allyship is an investment in yourself as much as others.
I like that. I think that is a good place to stop here. I really like that. And I want to just say, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but there's a ton of new interest right now in being anti-racist and being an ally and really working to create systemic change and being more inclusive and diverse in our companies. And one of the biggest things I think that allies can do right now is keep that momentum going, keep that push, keep that thrust to create change. And, so many companies are reaching out to us right now looking for help, and they're doing that because people internally in those companies are pushing for change. And so push for change. That's a big piece of being an ally right now, I think, is really stepping up and keeping that pressure going, keeping the conversations alive and the work going and creating change.
I totally agree. Let's not backslide. Please, let's not seek what we did in the past as getting back to normal. Let's seek a new normal that is one where we can all contribute and we all are supportive of each other, and work to be an allyship across the board. I would be really disappointed if we didn't take the lessons, these amazing lessons that we've learned over the last 3 months, right, forward and make a better world for ourselves.
Brenda, thank you. Thanks for all the work you do. Thanks for this conversation and all of our conversations that we have. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who joined today.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And join us each week for Leading with Empathy and Allyship. You can sign up to attend live with audience Q&A, or you can catch the podcast and video later. And you can share the podcast and video later with people who weren't here. I saw some talk about that in the chat. I wish my executives were here. Well, we have a resource for you. You can share it. Stay in the loop by going to changecatalyst.co, changecatalyst.co, and signing up for our newsletter, and then subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube channel. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.